In this short PowerPoint video, I'm going to talk about significant figures and calculations. We're going to talk about significant figures while we multiply and divide, and addition and subtraction. Now, the set of rules are completely different. So let's look at multiplication and division. The final answer that you get from multiplying and dividing will contain the same number of significant figures as the measurement with the least number of significant figures. For example, here, I have 14.63. This measurement has 4 sig figs. Okay. We're going to multiply it by 2.0, which has 2 sig figs. When you multiply and divide, you look at the one with the least number of significant figures. Your final answer should have 2 sig figs. Now this, when you put this in your calculator display will be 29.26, and that'll be centimeters squared. And so we have to just keep the first 2 digits, and your final answer will be 29 centimeters squared. Now we haven't talked about rounding, so let's take a break and let's look at rounding. And in rounding, what happens to the last digit that we keep? Well, it all depends. If we're looking at a digit that we drop that is 5 or greater, we're going to have to increase the last digit that we keep by 1. But if it's 4 or less, so let's change that to 4 or less, then we leave the digit unchanged. So if we look at this example down here, 1.52404, we want to round it to 3 sig figs. So we need to keep these values. This value is the first number we drop. It is 4 or less. So then we would record our answer as 1.52. Okay. If our example was 1.369 and we wanted to round to 2 sig figs, we would, since these are the 2 that we're keeping, this is 5 or greater, our final answer would be 1.4. So we go back to another example. Here, we're dividing 65.00, so we have 2 trailing zeros, so this is 4 sig figs. And here we have 3 significant figures. And our final answer, we can only show it to the least number of sig figs. We show it to 3 sig figs. Our calculator, of course, would give an answer of 14.34878587 grams per centimeter cubed. And since we only need 3 significant figures, this is a 4, so we would just record our final answer as 14.3 grams per centimeter cubed. Okay, so this is an example of multiplication and division with significant figures. Let's go on to addition and subtraction. Here, I don't care about the total number of significant figures in the number, I care about the number of decimal places. So your final answer will have the same number of decimal places as the measurement with the fewest. So in our first example, we're adding 11.24. Now it has 4 sig figs, but I'm only looking at decimal places, so I'm looking at 2 decimal places in this number. In our second one, we have 5.1462. It has a total of 4 decimal places. So when I actually look at my final answer, it can only contain 2 decimal places. So 2 decimal places is here, right up to there. That's 2 decimal places, and this is a 6, so we'd have to round this up to 16.39. When you look at subtraction, we have 18.4. That's it numbers to 1 decimal place. 87.87 is to 2 decimal places. My final answer, I can only show it to 1 decimal place, so it's 0.5. Now the total number of significant figures may change with addition and subtraction. It might be less, it might be greater than a number in one of the measurements, but we are concerned with the decimal places. So here's some examples. The first example here, we have only multiplication and division. And so let's look at our numbers here. This one has a total of 3 sig figs. This is a placeholder, so we have 1, 2, 3, 4 significant figures. We have captured zeros here. This is 5 sig figs. Our value here is 5 significant figures. We put our numbers into our calculator and we see comes out to be 0.6521906526. We only can go to the least number of significant figures, which is 3. So we would only keep those 3 values and we report our answer as 0.652. So we multiply and divide, we go to the least number of significant figures in one of our measurements. When we add and subtract, here we go to decimal places. This is 3 decimal places. This measurement has 1 decimal place, and our final number has 4 decimal places. When you add this and subtract this, it comes out to be 4.873 on our calculator display. We can only report the answer to the least number of decimal places. In this case, it's 1 decimal place. So we will only be keeping those values. This is 5 or greater, so we have to round up. So our final answer would be 4.9. Now when we combine addition, subtraction with multiplication and division, we have to keep these rules in mind as we go. So orders of operation, I would do the parentheses first. I need to subtract it. Subtraction involves number of decimal places. So here, this is 4 decimal places. This value has 2 decimal places. When I do subtract this, I get 0.3455. Now when I do this, I know it's only good to 2 decimal places, so I'm going to put an underline under the value that is the last value that is significant. Now I'm not going to round here because that introduces rounding error in the end. I'm going to use this entire value in the entire calculation. So I'm going to continue on, and now we have just multiplication and division, and we go by the total number of significant figures in that value. So here this is 4 sig figs. This one has 6 significant figures, and this one only 2 values are significant. So when we actually go on to the final answer, our display on our calculator would give 52.79904313. We can only go to 2 significant figures, so our final answer would be 53. In our last example, we have to do the multiplication first. Multiplication we know is total number of sig figs, so this one is 4 sig figs. Our second value has 2 significant figures. We multiply this together and we get 8.162. Only 2 significant figures, so I underline the last value that's significant. And then we're going to subtract. And so when we subtract, I'm going to show this vertical so you can see it, 8.162. And this is the last value that's significant, 8.02. And we're going to subtract those. This is good to 1 decimal place. This value is good to 2 decimal places. My final answer would only be good to 1 decimal place. I get 0.142 on my calculator. Only good to 1 decimal place. My final answer is 0.1. Okay, and that concludes showing examples where we're using significant figures in calculations.